My name is James Hart Du Preez. I'm a professional golfer from Pretoria, South Africa. Yeah, I started playing when I was about 3 years old, and I think that's where it all kicked off. I played all sports throughout primary school and high school. I actually, funny enough, went to high school on a cricket scholarship, and that changed very quickly when in my second year I started playing water polo. But yeah, I've got a massive love for sport, but right through my school career I knew that when I'm done with school I'd love to get into golf, and in 2018 I turned professional. And yeah, after a season and a half on tour, that's where I am at the moment. To put a finger on why I knew I'd play golf is quite difficult. I think having to rely solely on yourself when you're playing is something that I really enjoy. I think it was Tiger who said in an interview a couple of weeks ago at the Masters that no one's going to take you off the mound or sub you out of the game. No matter what's going on, you have to figure out a way to get it done. And that really appeals to me, as well as the fact that you can absolutely never master it. That annoys the hell out of me, but it's also probably the biggest driving factor, that every single day coming to practice or play, you're going to learn something, you're going to get better, but you'll never get to a point where you are done learning. And I think that is where the physical transformation took place as well. I joined Gavin Groves at HBC in I think 2012, 2013. I was roughly as tall as I am now, 206, but I was, some people called me a Chinese fighting snake. I was about 85 kilos coming out of school and riddled with injuries, and I think that came from growing so ridiculously quickly in such a short space of time. And Gavin and I slowly worked our way into a plan which has carried me through, I think, the last 6 or 7 years of training. I picked up, I think it was about 35 kilos in those 6 years or 7 years, which has, I think, been a byproduct of what we wanted to do, because I think the heart behind the training was essentially to avoid injury and control the forces at play in the swing a lot better. And yeah, it's something that I've fallen in love with. I think it's just as important as the technical side of the mental aspect is the physical aspect of the game, and I think you can't ignore it. Nowadays, I think if you look at the top 10 in the world, all of them have a massive power element to their game. But luckily enough, even when I was quote unquote a Chinese fighting snake, I never really struggled with distance to hit the ball far or anything like that. But what the training has helped me with is to control that aspect of my game a lot better. I think having the different gears, so to speak, that you can shift through to carry certain bunkers or whatever it might be is definitely massively beneficial. But it's provided an element of control to that power, which has been, I think, what we were after initially as well. So I turned pro in 2018 in April, and yeah, it was a fantastic experience. Turning pro as a lifelong dream realized, for sure. And unfortunately, the learning process, so to speak, was cut short when I got injured 3 events into my pro career. I was injured for what seemed like about 15 years. It turned out to be about 18 months. I tore a ligament in my wrist, which was supposed to be 1 operation and 4 months out, which was fine by me, and it ended up being 3 operations and 18 months later, which was, yeah, it was a tough time, and tough times never last. But yeah, I think the learning experience compared to pro versus amateur is definitely the financial element to it. It's a lot tougher for sure. I think having the sole, success of your career be placed upon you, which is both the reason I chose golf. It's kind of a double-sided sword, but I think I underplayed the pressures of the financial side, because in our sport you're not necessarily contracted by anybody, so there's no consistent pay, there's no pay that you can bank on for anything. So if you're not making cuts, you're not making money. And I think the biggest learning curve that I've taken is from veterans on tour, guys like Neil Skittercut and guys like that who have been out here for 20 years, and how they kind of brush those miscut weeks like water off a duck's back. I think the way they react to good performances and bad performances is very similar. Obviously they'll address things in those bad performances that can obviously improve and get them to where they want to be, but the way their emotions differ is very minimal, which I think with the stresses placed on us on tour week in and week out, if your emotions fluctuate massively, it's going to be an extremely draining process. So I think for me that's been something I've had to work on, because I'm someone who tends to wear my heart on my sleeve, and I've had to curb that a little bit and just kind of not internalize things, but kind of not feel them as so heavily, and just accept the fact that some weeks are good and some weeks are bad, and to take the good with the bad, and definitely enjoy the small victories along the way. 2020 has obviously been a difficult year for everyone with the global pandemic that's come about, and I think it's affected the golf maybe a little bit less than other sports. We've been lucky enough to be one of the sports that's probably best suited for what's been going on, seeing as though we are naturally socially distanced. It's been one thing that's been, I think, remarkably different is the fact that there's no spectators for us. I think there's definitely certain guys that feed off people being there and the energy that they bring to the party as well. Yeah, but this year has been, I think, a mixed bag of results for me. Early on in the season, our season running March to March, the start of the year, which is the end of last season, was a really good finish for me. Managed to finish 38th on the order of merit, which was, I think, in my first season, something that I was very happy with, and definitely had momentum to run into the season, starting obviously the following April that has just passed, but that was curbed by the virus obviously, and starting up again, I think it was either late July or early August. Definitely started slower than I would have liked, but myself and my coach Llewellyn van Leeuwen took the decision to do a lot of technical work through the Rise Up events and the events that the tour were nice enough to put on for us, and I think that was definitely a learning experience for me, because obviously as a professional you want to be able to compete every week, but the big picture approach that we took to improve on technique through those tournaments definitely paid off towards the end of this year now, with the 3 European Tour events we just played, being the Joburg Open, the Alfred Daniel and the SA Open, which just passed. Yeah, I had a mixed bag of results there as well. Made 2 out of the 3 cuts and a top 25 at Joburg Open, which was definitely a fantastic way to end the season, coming off a bit of a mediocre run of form. But I think the biggest jump for me in comparison to maybe last season was the way I approached the tournaments, one, and how I handled myself in tournament. I think personally for me the Alfred Daniel was a massive stepping stone this year just to make the cut. It might sound bad as a professional just to want to make the cut, but last year I was in a position to actually play pretty well, and I think I self-sabotaged in a way the last 5 holes of my second round, which led to a missed cut, and that definitely sat in the back of my mind for the whole year until we got to that event. So playing the tournament now and being aware of, so to speak, the demons that were there, and working through that and still managing to play my game, stick to my game plan, and just get through that week, which was definitely a massive personal victory. So I think it's little things like that if you had to check those little boxes along the way, you'll look back over a number of years and see, wow, you have really made some progress, even though a week where you do make the cut and finish middle of the pack or whatever it might be doesn't seem significant. I think a week like that for me definitely meant a lot. To obviously further our career, there's many different paths we can take. There's Asia Tour, Japan Tour, European Tour and PGA Tour, and my ultimate goal is to compete week in and week out on the PGA Tour. I think my game is better suited for that kind of warm weather in any case compared to Europe, but I would have gone to either the European Tour Q School or the Corn Ferry Tour School in the September that had just passed, but due to the pandemic they cancelled both of those events, so that has been moved to next year. Hopefully it'll take place, but my ultimate goal is to play on the PGA Tour and get my card there. I think definitely the tools that I possess for those global tours will set me up for success, and I think if I had to look back over the last 10 years of my golfing career, so to speak, I've maybe had a year of consistent practice, because every year has been marred by injury, unfortunately, and those things seem to have taken care of themselves with my body settling down and things like that. So I think being able to hit the ball as far as I do and consistently being one of the best putters on tour, I think if I can keep myself healthy for long enough, I'd like to think that I would achieve those goals in the coming years.